Faye Roth, it's great to have you joining us for an interview with Limitless. Thank you for giving us your time today. Faye, as Chief of Staff to CIO for a very large UK high street retailer, that's a role we don't hear very much about, but it's becoming increasingly popular. Can you tell us a little bit about what the role of a Chief of Staff is?
Absolutely. The role of CIO, I think, first of all, what you need to think about before thinking about the Chief of Staff role, the role of CIO, it is very multidimensional and increasingly so today. It's not a role where it's purely just about the technologies, not just purely about networks and keeping the lights on. It is about bringing new technology into an organisation to drive value. It is increasingly becoming more of a transformational role. So as well as a CIO being accountable for engineering and architecture and delivery of technology, as I say, increasingly it's transformation. There's a lot to do, and therefore I think that one person, it's very difficult to get across all of those things. And the role of Chief of Staff, therefore, it is really the right hand person, I guess, of the CIO to be able to take the vision, to take the direction, the strategy, and to make it happen, basically. It's a little bit, I guess, akin to COO to CEO in some organisations, where the CEO is the holding the vision, setting the direction, but again, CEO, lots of things to do. And often the COO provides that right-hand implementer, driver of outcomes. My role is across the whole IT landscape, I suppose, focusing a lot on implementation of strategy, focusing on the how we achieve what we need to achieve, the people, the processes, the ways of working, but also the key controls, the finances, the resourcing, recruitment, the resourcing solutions. And so it's a very interesting role because you get to get involved in lots of different things. And also, most importantly, it's about driving the outcomes for the business.
So what you've described there, it's enormous. And this is very different. So you're describing something very different from 15 years ago when technology was just being replaced for new and for upgrade because technology had advanced. But what you're describing there is people and process and budgets and finance, etc. And you touched on and used transformation. We hear transformation being used a lot. It's on every executive's lips. We're transforming our organisation. But you touched on people there as well. It strikes me transformation is more than just technology replacement. How important is people and culture to that successful transformation?
Transformation, I think, if one thinks about the word, transformation isn't just change. Technology change is just that. Transformation is an holistic evolution of a company, of a person, of a country, or whatever it is. It is multidimensional, and culture, people are an intrinsic part of that transformation. Changing the technology is changing how you get something done. Perhaps it might deliver a different outcome, but it would deliver perhaps the same outcome, but just in a different way. To really transform a business, to transform an industry, it requires people to change, and it requires also people, process, and technology. But I think culture is an interesting thing because it can be a blocker for transformation. It can be an enabler of the right culture, but it can also be the destination. So as a blocker, we see it a lot where it's sometimes it's the ultimate blocker, and transformation doesn't happen because of culture, because people are not encouraged to be bold, to be brave.
You were touching on culture being an enabler or a blocker. And what we sometimes see, and please share your experiences, is for many years organisations, particularly high street organisations, have worked in quite an analogue era. And yet technology is coming in as the enabler, and yet we're expecting the same people to deal with this new technology in a different way. That transition can be fearful for some, and perhaps that's the blocker you're describing, but enabling for those who are embracing it. What experiences have you had that sort of shed some light on that can help people understand this transition from what will fundamentally be the analogue era of purchasing clothes to a very digitally transformed organisation?
I think it challenges people's sense of who they are because it changes what they do. we define ourselves often a lot by what we do and what we've learned and the role that we perform. And you can often get technology comes along and fundamentally changes that job role. It's still producing the same outcome perhaps, but you're getting there in a different way. And so it can be very challenging for people to unlearn what they know and learn to achieve what they were previously achieving in a different way. And that requires people to be brave. And it requires those people, it requires management and leadership to understand that people are not necessarily going to get it right first time. So you need to provide the environment for people to be able to make that change. And if that cultural environment isn't encouraging people to take risks, to say it's okay to not understand in the first place. If that's not there, then you are going to have a very fearful, very resistant workforce. And however, if the culture is positive and does enable people to be brave, to relearn, and to empower people to really, I guess, use technology to make themselves better and to make their delivery better. And often I think transformational programs often talk about we need to change our culture in order to achieve better outcomes. And I think it is absolutely often the case that culture is one of the biggest barriers to success in an organisation. Because at the end of the day, it is people collaborating that drives the best outcomes, regardless of the tools and technology around them.
So I think we all understand that culture is frequently set from the top, and that can by definition is often the boardroom or the executive team or the exco, depending on your organisation. Technology has moved on so much that not everybody in the boardroom is tech savvy or tech enabled, etc. Or how much is it necessary for a boardroom to embrace change, to be advocates for transformation?
You cannot achieve transformation without advocacy from the top, without a clear vision and a clear sponsorship from the very top of an organisation. Technology is just one part of transformation. Transformation should always have the clear goal, the clear outcome for the customer and for the organisation, and that shouldn't be expressed in terms of technology. That should be, as I say, expressed in terms of the customer outcome or the company outcome, or both. But absolutely, tech is a fundamental part of every business today. Increasingly important value driver for every business, and therefore it is important for execs to take the time to understand technology, to take the time to understand what needs to be put in place in order to deliver great technology, and how technology is changing the people and the processes within their organisation. It's just not possible, I think, today for businesses to be successful without that understanding from the top.
And I think your answer sort of helps furnish some thinking that we have as an organisation at ThoughtWorks is, a modern digital business is not the same for every organisation. And I'm really quite keen to hear your thoughts on how do you encourage executive boards to not necessarily want to be exactly like their competitor? The example that you always hear is Amazon this and Amazon that, and they're such a large player that a lot of the freestanding retail bricks and mortar stores, seem to have an aspiration that we want to be like Amazon. Well, Amazon's Amazon.
Yeah.
How much digital fluency do organisations need to have themselves, or do they need to find their own level of what works for them? Because we know we have a narrative that says, find out what it is you want to aspire to in your digital fluency and work towards that, as opposed to wanting to suddenly be Amazon. How realistic is that expectation?
Absolutely. I mean, the Amazon environment is very different. The Amazon business model is very different, and there's lots of speculation about who's making money in the new world of some of these big giant tech firms. So I think it's a mistake. It's a mistake anyway, I think, to just chase being like Amazon or being like any individual competitor. One should really take a step back and think about one's customer. What do they want? Who is one's customer? What do I need to provide to that customer in order for me to have a successful business? And therefore, what are the most important things that I need to do to achieve that. And you will have certain things which you would need to prioritise in order to deliver those outcomes, but you don't have to be excellent at everything. You don't have to do everything at once, and so it's important to set out where you want to be, where you are, and where you're going to realistically try to get to within what time frame.